I know you guys have been waiting for it, but we're working on the Oldsmobile again. So it was cold. Working outside isn't fun, but also my firstborn child was born in January. So been dealing with a brand new baby. Not much time to work on the olds. So last time we were working on this Oldsmobile, we had all kinds of carburetor issues. So the first problem was when you revved it up, it stumbled and it died. And also, it would eventually just cut out. So I figured out both those problems. First one is going to be the top plate on this carburetor. So let me show you guys what's wrong with it. You guys can see right here, basically there's this lever right here that moves up and down the accelerator pump. You guys see how that works? And then right here is the adjustment. So this screw, what it does is it moves on this shaft and it can either go forward or backwards, and that basically, what it does is it controls how big of a squirt you get when you use your accelerator pump. Now check this out. I can turn this screw right here by hand, which means it doesn't tighten at all. It just spins, spins, spins. You can back it out a little bit, but basically the threads inside of this are stripped out, which what that is meaning is that every time I would use my accelerator pump, this would scoot backwards so that I never really got a full shot. It was never long enough to actually go all the way down in the bore. So I bought a new top plate and I put it on the old bottom of the carburetor. And you know what, it fixed two issues. It fixed this one, but also the other one, this choke never liked to spring shut or do anything like that, where the other one now does. So that's good. The second issue was that it would just die randomly. And it ended up being, I was like, it has to be fuel related. So I rigged up a electric fuel pump, and magically it runs and it continues to run. And it doesn't ever die anymore. So obviously when I rebuilt the fuel pump that's in this, well, maybe I didn't do a good job, maybe I didn't know how to do it, I don't know, but it just shows that the fuel pump is toast. We're going to run an electric one for the meantime. Eventually I will get another fuel pump, but this car is not like, you know, a small black Chevy, $30 later you have a brand new pump. They're like $200 for the pump. So we're going to run electric for now, but let me show you guys how it runs. The only difference between the top that I had and the top that I bought, you can see, you know, the color difference, but the fuel inlet, instead of being back here, is actually up here, which makes me think maybe it came off of a different carburetor, I don't know, but everything else is the same, so it all hooked up perfect. So what I've done is I took the fuel line off of the parts car, and I put it on, and I have it right now, it's hooked up to the fuel pump that's in here, but I unhooked it since I didn't want to cut the original fuel line in order to get this to work, and I've hooked up this electric fuel pump. So basically what we have is, right now it's going to be running off the battery, and then the gravity feed tank goes to the end of the actual electric fuel pump. So let's put some gas in it, and then we'll fire it up, and I'll show you guys. It actually runs pretty good, all things considered. Alright, now the fuel pump should be pumping with gas. Before it was just pumping air. Exhaust sound level. What do you think, guys? The exhaust is really loud, and I'm hoping to quiet it down, but the engine sounds really, really good, all things considered. See if it'll rev up. So we have two problems fixed. I need to figure out a place to put this fuel pump.
We can all be in it. All three of us.
Alright guys, so introducing baby Joshua. He was born on January 21st. And as of today, he's about 2 months old. So he's a very happy, chunky baby. So sorry I haven't worked on the Oldsmobile, but I've been a little busy with this guy. Say hi, little buddy. Say hi. Give a smile for everybody in YouTube land.
Can you give a smile?
No. No. He's grumpy face. He just woke up. Since we have it running decently and it sounds decent, there's two things we're going to do. One, we're going to work on the fuel system. We're going to get the sender working. We're going to get gas in the tank. We're going to get the tank lines figured out. And we're going to hook up that electric fuel pump and hopefully find a good spot for it. It's probably going to be a temporary spot, but we'll get to that. And then also I bought a new exhaust for it. So the last video did really well, so I figured we'll spend some money on the Oldsmobile. Here is the fuel tank out of the parts car. You might be thinking, why? The parts car is super rusty. Why would you grab this tank? Well, the parts car is rusty where pine needles were, sitting in the body and stuff like that. This was under the trunk, and it's not too bad. The other reason why I picked it, because if you go like this, there's very little crusties or anything inside that I can tell. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to get this plug out. We're going to try to get the sender out, and then from there we can verify kind of what the inside of the tank looks like. We'll see. I'm going to pick either this tank or the tank that's in there. I don't know which one will be better, but I have two to pick from, and we'll pick the better of the two. As expected, I had to use the drill to take these off, which I'll figure that out later. It looks like the sender is pretty simple. Ta-da! There's the sender. Don't know if we can reuse that, but the important part is looking inside of this tank. And I know you guys can't see in there, but it's pretty clean. All things considered, it's pretty clean. So what I've seen done in the past is people put a chain in there and rattled it around and moved it around and kick up all the rust particles and knock them loose and then dump it out. Here is the gas tank out of the 53 Olds, and I think it's in very similar shape. The only difference is this. There is liquid in there. So let's drain it out and see what it looks like, huh? So here is the sender out of the tank on the car. You know what? It's got all this nasty sludge stuff in it that I don't think the parts car tank has. I think I'm going to use a parts car tank. They both are about similar condition with the exception of the inside. Now here's this nasty gas that came in it. So let's see if these floats float. Floats. Well, they both float, so maybe I don't need to buy a float. Maybe I just need to fix the sender. Well, that's good. Now I gotta get rid of this nasty gas. Now I have been buying stuff for the car in the meantime. And one of the things I bought is this battery hold down thing. So it's plastic, but it's definitely period. Obviously by the picture in the box. It's a Canter Road plastic battery hold down. The original. Prevents voltage leakage, acid resistant, cannot short circuit. So definitely period, considering that the newest car on here, it looks like 1958. And they cannot supply for the Pontiac. So I'm pretty sure it's from the 50s. Made in Massachusetts, but it was cheap. And I thought it was cooler than buying the metal one. So I got some threaded rod. We'll put that together and get this battery held down. I believe the original rods had hooks on the bottom of them, but I just have a nut and a washer at the bottom to hold them in. The same on both sides. And that way this battery is now permanent in the car. So one thing, this fender nut is a well nut that's supposed to go in here is missing. Eventually I'll get one out of my parts car, but I found another bolt for that. All this stuff was gone when I got the car, but now the battery is pretty solid where it is. Don't think it's going anywhere, and that's always a plus. Here's the gas tank sender. It makes no sense to put the gas tank in and out without fixing this first. So there's a rheostat. You can see it in here. I've already cleaned it up a little bit. Basically, as this little nubbin, as it moves up and down along this with the change of the level of gas, it sends a different ohms reading through the sender wire, and that changes the gauge on the dash. So I've already tested it, put it all back together, cleaned it, put it all back together, and the reading does change when it moves. So with that done, we can put this back in the tank, and then hopefully we can figure out a good spot for the electric fuel pump and get that all wired up. After vacuuming out as much as I could from this fuel tank, which is funny because this is the one from the parts car, that still gets me, I went ahead and I made a gasket out of this bulk cork and put it around the bottom. You can see it in there. And then, since all the bolts broke off when I tried to get the sender out, I just used some metal tapping screws and pilot holes and just to get it in. And it'll work. It'll seal. It'll be just fine. Now the tank is ready to go back in the car, which is gonna be a fun job, but luckily it wasn't too bad of a job to do this. I'm probably gonna put a piece of hose on here first before I throw it up in there, just so it makes that one less thing I have to do. In order to wire up my electric fuel pump, what I don't want to do is I don't want to mess with any of the factory harness, and I don't want to mess with, I really want to be able to reverse it and have no trace that it's been there. So what I have is I have a toggle switch that I put somewheres. I have a toggle switch, and I'm going to mount it in this hole that's already in the dash right here, and it's a perfect spot for it. I'm going to do probably forward to turn it on and then backward to turn it off. I just have to remember to turn it on before I start the car, and then after I turn it off I need to turn the fuel pump off. But like I said, I don't want this to be any kind of something that somebody can't reverse. So I'm going to have an inline fuse as well that will go into it. But basically I'm going to run it from the battery through the fuse to the switch, and then from the switch follow the factory routing up through the roof and then down to the fuel pump. Pretty simple. Ground the fuel pump to the frame and it should work. And I know I would want to buy a whole brand new fuel pump for the engine, but for $200 really. And this, I have everything here, and I can get it done without spending really any money at all. The fuel pump install is done, so we have a wire that runs from the battery through a fuse to this switch, and then from this switch back out through the firewall, and then I ran it along the top of the frame all the way down to the fuel pump. Ended up putting the fuel pump up here, and it works really, really well. It's grounded to the frame right here, and so far so good. What I can do, you jump in the car, you flip the switch, fuel pump turns on, and you get fuel all the way to the engine. I was able to blow out the fuel line, and it terminates right here. So sadly, what I had to do was I had to cut it, but that's okay. I can always put it back to stock. And then we have a fuel line, which I should probably zip tie a little bit farther down so it stays away from the belt, that runs up, comes up to the carburetor. I think I'll have to remove this line just because it's kind of in the way for now. Once we get back to the factory fuel pump, if I decide to do that. Right now it's now a vacuum pump for the wipers, so that's the only thing it really does. But I think we have all the fuel issues figured out, finally. Alright, I want to end this video so I can go ahead and publish it. So we're not going to do the exhaust in this video. I just want to show you how awesome it starts now. So, cable on, fuel pump on, and turn the key. Look at that. So for some reason, the transmission has started to go. And I don't know why it's doing that. It's in neutral. I'm guessing it's supposed to always go unless you have the parking brake on. Obviously there's no brakes on the car, but she runs 1,000 times better than she did. So next is exhaust, and then brakes, and then possibly parking brake. But yeah, that whirring noise is the drive shaft hitting the parking brake assembly because the rear end's not as high as it should be. So we'll get that figured out, but it runs really nice. Alright guys, I have to mention this U-joint. So I had to buy a new old stock U-joint, so there's a number if that helps anybody out. But you can find a U-joint for an Olds 98 all day long. You can find a U-joint for an Olds from 1952 and down, and from 54 and up. It looks like 53 is one of these weird years. The one that I bought previous to this it was too short. It wasn't wide enough, so it wouldn't made up to the differential. But one called a Fusick, they had it. And sadly, $100 later, I have a U-joint that works. It's the most I've ever spent on a U-joint, but you kind of need it to drive the car. So I wanted to show that to you guys. If anybody needs one, maybe Google that and find one cheaper than $100. I don't know, but it worked out well. It just made my wallet really, really light.